Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another interview on the Art of Intervention Project Summit. Really excited about today because we're talking about something we haven't talked about much about, breaking the shame cycle of addiction, and who better to talk about it than Dr. Jaffe. So Dr. Jaffe, welcome. And how do you describe who you are?
How do I describe who I am? It's becoming a more and more complex question. Um, I'm a guy trying to figure out how to help the most people that I can during my life. Used to be addicted to meth. Kicked that about 18 years ago, and really, honestly, I've been trying since then to learn how to help as many people as possible, not to reach the depths of despair that I had to, not end up in jail like I had to, while also not just looking at the next phase of their life as a drug-free phase, but rather understand that they can level up and go wherever they want in life, and there's nothing holding them back. It doesn't matter how far down you've been. That is not a predictor of how high you can go.
Yeah, there is no ceiling on where we can go in our life. So on your hat there, you have a few letters. Why don't you tell people what that stands for?
Sure. So it's Ignited, IGNTD, Ignited. I thought I was being really clever initially with the name, and then I realized nobody understands it until I tell them it stands for Ignited. Um, Ignited came out of what I just mentioned, right? My job is not just to help people find freedom for addiction. That's a nice element of what we do, but it's to really elevate and find purpose and really light a fire in their life. Um, so the company is the publishing company that put out my book, The Abstinence Myth. It's a company that runs our Ignited Recovery Hero program, which is our online program, the one that runs our new Family SOS program for loved ones of people who struggle with addiction and are lost and don't really know what to do. And in the past have paid interventionists or just went online and researched. We created an entire program now to help family members. Again, the goal is singular. How do we get to help as many people as possible ignite?
Very nice. Yeah, I remember when I saw Ignite, I figured out what it was. Just so you know, I was able to figure that one out without knowing.
Thank
So
you.
yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Just to give you a little kudos there. And the absence myth is something people are going to be able to kind of go to the link and the free gift part, and they can go kind of take care of that after it's all done too, which is really cool. So thanks for that
Of
offer as
course.
well. So I want to jump into this word of shame, because families deal with it a lot, and you help people break free from that, and it's a big, humongous capital letter for a lot of people in this world of
Yep.
recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's clarify what shame is to start out. It's always a good place to start. Shame is the feeling that arises within you when you feel like there's a gap between the way you see yourself, who you are, what your values are, etc., and the expectations that other people around you or the world has. So it's not the same as guilt. Guilt is feeling badly about something you did. Shame is feeling badly about who you are. And language is a huge part of the shame equation. It's why I really fight. You'll notice I used to call myself an ex-meth addict. I'm trying to eliminate that word from as many versions of conversation as I can. We need to remove the problem from the person, right? We need to disambiguate the two. So when you turn to your loved one and you say, hey, you're an alcoholic, whether you realize it or not, what you're doing is you're taking all of the meaning of alcoholic and you're placing it inside of your loved one's brain. And that comes with a lot of collateral damage, right? You have an idea of what it is, they have an idea of what it is. It traps them because they have a sense of, well, I'm now stuck in this box. And so look, we're going through in the world right now the same kind of idea around racial issues, right? It's the same conversation. The Me Too movement and the women's suffrage movement was the same thing. What it means to be a woman now is different because people went through a lot of work to change the meaning of that. And so for me, shame is about, let's remove the personhood uh, piece here, right? I can deal with what you're struggling with and help you solve that problem without making you the problem.
And so how long do you feel like it kind of really takes people to kind of grasp that when you present that to them?
It's a good question. I've given talks in front of, I don't even know, a few tens of thousands of people between the online work and the in-person work that I've done. Some are family members, some are people who struggle, and oftentimes professionals. I'll tell you the way I have to do this when I'm not trying to get quickly to the point because we've got 20 minutes is I gradually walk people through the understanding that shaming other people is not a good idea. That's number one. And that labels and the way we talk to others matters. So that's kind of how I always start. And I'll start really subtly using research. If you want to give people a link to my TEDx talk, I go into some of this research in there that everybody reacts to by saying, oh, wow, that's terrible. It's terrible that just speaking to people differently or having expectations of them can change the way they behave. And it's not until I get everybody to sign on to that that I turn the corner and I say, well, how do you describe addicts? Like if you had to write a list of words on a board of what you consider addicts to be, what would they be? And they're liars, they're unmotivated, they're sick, they're conniving, they're narcissistic. And I say, whether you know it or not, when you call somebody an addict, you're taking all the words you just put up on the board and you are putting them inside the person. And if that's the way you want to treat the people you're saying you're going to help, then that's fine. But just be conscious of the fact that that's what you're doing to them. And ask the question, do I need to do that? Do I need to use the word, the label, hey, you're an addict or you're an alcoholic? Or can I just say, hey, it sounds like you're struggling with drug use?
So important what you just said, because I was sober 19 years ago in a 12-step journey, right? And I feel like I'm in the professional field now and the years in this, seeing kind of, I think, a shift in language also of not putting these shaming type labels on people, but really empowering them in their own recovery to believe in themselves again.
100%. And look, I gave a TED talk, I think it's 7 years ago now or something like that, which came on the heels of me doing some research, et cetera, myself. I did a year and a half long study in 2010 at UCLA. Shame was, after cost, it was the number one reason people didn't seek help. And here's the thing, we can blame addicts, I'm putting that in air quotes, we can blame addicts for not wanting to get help. But if we don't realize the biases that we're creating to make it harder for them to seek help, then it's on us. Now, in 2010, I hadn't read a lot of research that other people had done on this, but since then, there has been a ton. And so Robert Ashford is a guy who's done a bunch of research on labeling and shame and the title addict and alcoholic, and we can talk more about that if you want. But even John Kelly, who's a very well-known psychiatrist, very well respected in the field of addiction, has put out studies that say explicitly shame and stigma is the idea that those people, addicts, alcoholics, etc., are damaged. So shame and stigma have been shown to reduce the likelihood that somebody will go to treatment and reduce the engagement that they will have with treatment. So we can stick to our guns, and I don't know if I can swear on this thing. I get
We have adults watching it, so
I get the crap beat out of me sometimes online for suggesting that, calling somebody an addict and an alcoholic is not okay. There's now a big body of literature. You can ignore it. You can do whatever you want with it, but just know that you're doing it at the peril of the people you're saying you want to help.
And I can understand why people would look at it that way and say, hey, you can't be doing this, because that's kind of been the history of this is, I'm an addict, and keeping that label, which I don't call myself an addict anymore, myself personally. I call my own self just a child of God who used to struggle with addictions, and now I don't. But from the family's point of view, they can hold on to a lot of this shame too, because of what that person did. So how do you help the families in your programs that you do too?
So that's why the families don't talk to a lot of outside people about this oftentimes, because the shame parlays, a shame kind of gets spread around the entire family. My parents didn't talk to anybody about it. My dad was a physician. I was addicted to meth. It was pretty freaking clear I was addicted to drugs. It's not like I was 124 pounds, black circles under my eyes. Like everybody who saw me knew I wasn't healthy. My dad never talked about it. And they didn't talk to other people about it because it was really shameful for them. The idea is we did something wrong. We screwed this up. And so the way I talk to families about this all the time is we have to do the shame fighting work around all the different pieces of the puzzle. You have no idea how many families I talk to, or maybe who they're not even comfortable talking in front of each other about the impact that this has had on them. And I always say to people, my wife and I preach radical transparency. We've got to get everybody around together and have very uncomfortable, very honest conversations about where we are. Because if we can't be honest about where we are and about the struggles we're having and the fears and the anxieties, how do we ever expect to create a healthy system where everybody's everybody's okay sharing. Now, I do think it's partially our job, and that's why I love coming on this with you and doing this work. Is it's our job to keep pushing this message out, because yes, there will be a lot of people who resist, and the people who resist, I think, are people who have benefited from the current system. I don't think they're doing it because of ill will. But if you've walked into a meeting for the last 25 years and called yourself an addict, and that's helped you stay sober, you say to yourself, it worked for me, so it should work for somebody else. But that's a mistake. What worked for you does not have to work for someone else. We know from the data that AA works for the people that it works for. 12-step programs work for the people that like them and engage with them. But we also know that they don't work for the vast majority of people. So I'm not even saying AA programs are bad. I'm saying maintain them for the people who want to engage in them. But let's recognize that they are really difficult for people to engage in. They're shaming and shameful for the people who first enter. So yes, if you've got 18, 20 years, kudos to you. But that newcomer who just walked in, making them get up and say, my name is blah, 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 and I'm an addict, creates shame in them. And you're just going to have to recognize that. And so giving them alternative ways of getting in, what people in AA would call the easier, softer way, is actually a really amazingly positive step in the right direction to get more people engaged. And for family members, you know this, if you're listening right now and you've got a loved one who's still actively having a problem, if you can get them to move even a little bit in the direction of help, that would be a huge win.
Yeah, baby steps for sure. I mean, walking through a door is can be hard for people. And over the last 19 years since I've been in recovery, from substances, 18 months from gambling, but along the journey, there have been new avenues for people to seek community in recovery, which is really cool. The recovery collateral, I say, is like really vastly broadened. So again, people can love what you're saying and they can maybe not like it. People can love 12-step recovery and they cannot like it, but something to get people in the right direction and they can grow from there.
100%. I think the goal for us as a system, and by that I mean the recovery system, should be to expose everybody to all the options, have them be able to pick which one they want to engage in. And by that, and this is why I call my book The Abstinence Myth, I'm talking about everything. Do you want to quit or do you not want to quit? Do you want to switch from opiates to weed or do you want to completely drop them? Do you want to switch from opiates to medication? Do you want help from a physician, a yoga teacher, a guru? I don't care where it is, right? That's, to me, the power is in the recovery. How you get there is, I'm completely agnostic when it comes to that. I think my system is great, but it's obviously not going to work for everybody else. There will be people who listen to me and go, I never want to talk to that guy or listen to him speak again. And I need to take my ego out of the equation. And instead of saying to them, no, come on, you just don't understand what I'm doing. It works if you work it. Just do it again and just do it again and just do it again. I need to say to them, okay, you don't like this, that's fine. Check out Rob's work. Check out Annie Grace's work. Check out The Tempest. Check out Stanton Peel's work. Check out Andrew Tatarski's work. Check out Ham's. Check out Moderation Management. Right? I need to show them all the options, because if they find one thing that they like and they engage in it, the odds of them finding recovery increase exponentially.
And that's how the Art of Intervention project actually came about, was because people need resources and to understand, how do certain things affect certain family systems. But ultimately what you said in the beginning of this is the goal is not to just be in recovery and like I'm sober now or clean or whatever word, but it's transforming your life is the key. And you mentioned that earlier. So what does that really look like when people can, I mean, you're coming out of addiction, to even think about living a transformed life seems so far away.
You're right. And I talk to my people about this all the time. I do believe in incremental work. The life I live right now, I would have been completely unable to imagine 19 years ago when I stopped using meth. It wouldn't have even been on my radar. I didn't know that I could love the way that I live right now. It wasn't in my lexicon. I didn't understand it. So I always encourage people to, yes, think about where you want to go long-term, but set up small incremental steps of moving yourself in the direction that you want to move from. It's, it's almost like when you climb a mountain or a hill, right? As you walk up, you see more. So at the bottom of the hill, you might look around and go, oh, there's some houses here and I see a road. And then you climb up and you go, oh, I didn't realize there was a neighborhood beyond that neighborhood. And then you get to the top of the mountain. You're like, oh my God, there's an ocean over there. I didn't even know there was an ocean in that side. I think that's kind of the life we live. You keep moving up, and as you move up, your view expands. And so don't make decisions that hamstring what you can do right now. But always, 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 whenever I work with clients, I'm always trying them to understand what their next immediate goal is. 6 months, maybe 3 months. Like, where do you want to be then? And then we work towards that goal. And when you get there, we can reevaluate.
Yeah, steps and goals, all that fun stuff. And I love the quote over your right shoulder there. It's like, why not go out on a limb? Like, that's where the fruit is, right? But to get to the fruit, you got to have roots, and you got to have a tree trunk, and you got to have branches, and then all
Absolutely.
that stuff. So you're helping people say, hey, the limb's kind of flimsy, but I want to get out there because that's where the beauty is.
100%. And look, as you just mentioned, to get to the limb, I got to climb the tree. So how do I start the climb? I can't get to the end of the limb just by myself. I got to go climb the tree. And then once I climb high enough, I got to turn to the branch. So every life in general, I look at it almost like a map. When you want to go and travel somewhere, you can now look at Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever and see the entire area. Life doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So there is a map, but we're only going to be able to look at your map when you die, right? I'm only going to get a sense of what your life looked like at the end. So that's why sometimes you take a turn and it ends up being a dead end because there was no Google Maps didn't tell you what was going to happen if you took that left. That doesn't mean you don't need to explore. We should be open to experiences. We should be open to expanding, pushing our own boundaries and seeing where things can go.
Yeah, and while you were sharing that, I don't know, I started thinking about my son for some reason because I come from a long line of people that have had addictions, and so I want to speak into that for a minute. That people have this thought that, oh, look at our history, you're bound to become an addict. How do you
Mm.
disrupt that for a family to just quit believing that lineage?
So there are a few really important pieces to that. First of all, in the book, I talk about 4 factors. This is not new: biological, psychological, environmental, and spiritual elements of the addiction and mental health struggles. They probably actually parlay to the entire life experience, but biology, psychology, environment, spirituality. There are families with a big biological predetermination push, right? There, the risk factors from a biological standpoint are huge. But even at their worst, we're talking 40, 50, 60% of the equation. That still leaves you with about half of the equation to affect by environmental, psychological, and spiritual manners. And it actually gets even more complicated because we know now that your biology is affected by your environment and psychology. So even if you have huge risk factors, there's this science brand new in the last 10 to 15 years, epigenetics, and epigenetics has shown us the way you live your life, the food you eat, the level of stress you're under, the support you get, the human touch and connection that you have with others, all those things actually impact the genetics that you will experience in your life. And so when you reduce stress, when you engage in yoga, when you eat healthy food, when you take care of yourself, some of those risky genes actually get turned off and they're easier for you to manage. So it's not an all or nothing, black or white, I'm doomed to be anything. That does not exist. It doesn't happen. And so if there is a lot of risk in your family, and it is hard for you to tell the difference between, if your dad was an quote unquote alcoholic again, right? If your dad was that, are you affected by his genes? Or are you affected by the fact that every time he came back from work, he showed you drinking? Or are you affected by the fact that he screamed at you every time he didn't like what was going on, right? Which one of those is the relevant ones? And it's hard for us to sometimes tease that apart.
Yeah, those can all blur together real, very, very strongly. And
Very easily.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of hope there. And as you were saying, the 4 things, then you mentioned this physical touch thing.
Mm.
I just want to ask you, since we're in the middle of this unique part of our world, we haven't talked a lot about COVID or anything on the show, but how have you kind of seen maybe that affect people that you're coaching in your programs to do some kind of mind shift?
It's hard, man. I mean, it's so difficult. It's so much harder for people to not isolate right now because even if you're doing Zoom meetings, et cetera, the moment it turns off, there's nobody around you and you can go back to whatever was going on before. I always come from the shame-free place, right? I have my F shame bracelet on. And so I think it's our job right now to be as accepting, as empathetic, as open to the fact that people are going to have a hard time keeping their stuff together. It's just tough. I mean, my wife, who's one of the most functional people I know on the face of the earth, is really vulnerable and touchy and struggling right now. Why? Because it's weird. It's just a weird life. things just reopen and then they're starting to close again. It's like, I just explained in a podcast that's going out next week. It's like we're all experiencing emotional whiplash over and over and over. And we feel the damage. So here's the thing, right? Like I talk about in my book, the drinking is not the real problem. The problem is the stuff you're experiencing that is being solved by the drinking. So if that's anxiety or depression for you, they're probably exacerbated right now. If you had social anxiety and you had a hard time connecting to people, well, that's even more difficult right now because there's not as many people and you're isolating. We need to be really compassionate right now and understand it's not going to work the way we want it to. Alcohol sales have doubled or more. People are struggling. A lot of people I talk to are home struggling more than they've ever done it before. My job is really to hold their hand, show them that there's a better way, and support them through this time.
Thank you for all that you do. And there's always hope, you know. And
100%.
my daughter last year said to me whenever it was in the last year, she had said to me, she's like, you
What
know,
is
Dad,
time?
what's that?
What is time at
Yeah,
this
right.
point? I don't
Yeah,
even know what time it
exactly.
is.
Yeah. She said to me, she goes, Dad, you know, I don't ever want to drink alcohol because of what I do, right? In the story she overhears doing stuff like this. And I pulled the car over and talked to her. I said, you know, honey, my hope is that you can have a good relationship with alcohol and have a glass of wine with your daughters or your friends or whatever down the road. And, you know, we do come from a long line of people with
Mm,
addictions. And I said, so we're just going to keep a pulse on that. I was like, but based on what we believe in, things you like that doesn't have to be your story. And so I do hope that for people that can find a normal way to enjoy, but if they can't, then they got to go through some changes. And that's what this whole summit's about, is like, here's tap
yeah,
into what you want and leave what you don't.
absolutely. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So thanks for your time today. I love what you're doing. Thanks for blessing our audience with the abstinence myth, and go have a wonderful day today.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, everybody who's watching. And as Rob just said, there's always hope. Just keep going.
Yes, sir. Catch you later.
All right.